The last vote came in at 03:00 Earth Standard Time. Nobody on the Remnant Council was asleep. They had all been watching the screen in the cold conference room under the mountain in northern Canada, where the emergency government had been running for 2 years. The numbers did not change when the final planet cast its decision. 118 in favor of the severance protocol. 1 against. The room was very quiet. Director Orrin Hale read the full text of the Galactic Conclave's verdict out loud slowly, all the way to the end. It called humanity a persistent destabilizing presence. It called human emotion a biological defect producing irrational and dangerous behavior. It called human expansion unchecked aggression dressed in the language of curiosity. At the bottom, stamped in the Conclave's seal, were the words, "Total severance. All trade routes closed. All communication channels blocked. All existing human-alien agreements dissolved." He folded the paper when he was done. He set it on the table. "Then we work," he said. Nobody cheered. Nobody cried. They had done their crying earlier over other losses. Now there was just the work. 3 floors below, Admiral Dara Voss was looking at a list of ships. 14 warships remained in active service. She had lost 6 in the past 18 months, not to battle but to the blockade. Supply chains cut. Parts unavailable. 3 crews had gone to sleep on ships that ran out of power in the dark between stars and were rescued only barely. She had read every incident report. She kept them in a physical folder because she did not trust the servers anymore. She crossed a name off the list, then started writing next to the remaining 14, crew counts, fuel levels, known damage, estimated range. She worked the way she always worked, one real thing at a time. On the other side of the galaxy, in the grand chamber of the Conclave, High Speaker Doru of the Vethani people was receiving congratulations. He was tall, pale-skinned, with 4 thin fingers on each hand, and he accepted the praise with the quiet dignity of someone who believed deeply that he had done the right thing. The Vethani were old diplomats. They had governed multilateral bodies for 4 centuries. They had seen species collapse before. They had seen what happens when dangerous variables are allowed to keep expanding. "The humans will struggle for perhaps 1 generation," he said to his aide that night, "and then they will request reinstatement. We will review their application in 30 years, perhaps 40. By then they may have learned restraint." His aide did not disagree. No one in the Vethani delegation disagreed. They had all voted the same way. Only one voice in the entire chamber had voted differently. Councillor Fiend of the Suri people, a short, stocky species with gray-brown skin and very large eyes, had stood up before the vote and said, "We are about to make a mistake that we will spend the next century trying to undo. What we call their violence is also their courage. What we call their irrationality is also their creativity. We are not containing a danger. We are discarding a gift." The chamber listened politely, and then voted 118 to 1. Fiend went back to her quarters and wrote in her journal, "They will be fine. I am more worried about us." Back on Earth, the first emergency session of the Remnant Council ran until dawn. They drew up a list of priorities. Food production. Earth's colonies had to become fully self-sufficient within 3 years. Energy. The Conclave's fuel networks were now closed, which meant everything ran on reserves. Communication. The internal human network had to be rebuilt without any infrastructure touching Conclave relays. At the bottom of the list, item 9, someone had written, "Morale." Orrin Hale circled it. He knew it was the hardest one. People could handle hunger if they understood why. People could handle cold. But the feeling of being thrown away by the rest of the known universe, that was a different kind of weight. He wrote a broadcast that night. He sent it to every human colony, every ship, every station still in range. It was not long. He did not talk about the Conclave. He did not talk about the vote. He talked about what humans had done before when the road closed, not in space, but on their own world across thousands of years, when mountains and oceans and deserts said you cannot pass, and humans said we will find a way. "We have always been the species that was told no," he said. "We have never stayed stopped." On the flagship of her small fleet, Admiral Voss listened to the broadcast on a small speaker at her desk. She finished her fuel calculations while it played. When it was over, she took the folder of incident reports and put it in a drawer. Then she started a new folder. She labeled it, "What We Are Building Next." Outside the viewport, the stars burned the same as always. That was fine. Humanity had never needed the universe to care. They had always done better when it did not. The conclave went asleep expecting a slow death. Humanity went to work. The Dorvaki enforcement ship arrived above the colony of Arden on a Tuesday. It did not announce itself. It simply appeared in the upper atmosphere, blocking the sun from the northern fields, and broadcast a single message on all frequencies. This agricultural installation is in violation of Conclave Severance Protocol 7, subsection 3. All stockpiled resources are subject to seizure. Comply or face authorized force. Sergeant Rhea Solis was in the middle of a seed count when the message came through. She was sitting on the dirt floor of the storage barn with bags of drought-resistant wheat around her and a data pad on her knee. She listened to the message twice. Then she stood up, brushed the dirt off her uniform, and walked outside to look at the ship. It was big. It was designed to look big. The Dorvaki were good at that, making things that announced their own power before a word was spoken. The ship's shadow stretched across 3 kilometers of field. She keyed her radio. "I need 4 people at the north perimeter. No weapons. Bring the water containers and the survey flags." The voice on the other end paused. "Sarge, they have a cruiser parked over our heads." "I know, bring the flags." The Dorvaki sent a landing shuttle down 20 minutes later. 6 soldiers stepped out, armored, carrying disruption rifles, expecting to find either an empty barn or a crowd of frightened farmers. What they found was Sergeant Solis and 4 humans already in the field, planting survey markers in straight lines across the soil, working calmly and without hurry. The Dorvaki commander walked up to her. He was 2 heads taller than her, his armor the dark green of deep ocean water. "This facility is under seizure order," he said. "I understand," she said, not stopping her work. "I'm surveying the field borders so your team can document the exact coordinates of what you're taking. It's standard procedure for contested resource claims. You'll need the survey numbers for your conclave filing." He stared at her. "What filing?" "The legal filing. Every seizure under Protocol 7 requires documentation submitted to conclave arbitration within 72 hours, or the seizure is considered unlawful and subject to review." She looked up at him. "You knew that, right?" He did not know that. His orders had been simple: go down, take the food, leave. She handed him a printed copy of Protocol 7, full text, which she had read the night before, 3 times with a highlighter. She had marked every procedural requirement in yellow. There were 11 of them. He stood in the field, holding the document. "You're welcome to proceed," she said. "I just want to make sure your team is protected legally. It would be unfortunate if the seizure were thrown out on procedural grounds and the conclave lost the case." She smiled at him. It was a very calm smile. The Dorvaki commander took the document back to his shuttle. He was on the radio with his superior for 40 minutes. Then his shuttle lifted off, and the cruiser moved out of the atmosphere without another word. The 4 humans with the survey flags watched it go. One of them said, "Did we just beat a warship with paperwork?" "With their own paperwork," Solis said. "Put the flags away." That same week, 500 light-years from Arden, Dr. Lena Marrow was in a maintenance corridor of a human deep space station doing something that was technically illegal under the Severance Protocol, sending an encrypted signal to a Suri research station on the far side of a conclave relay. She had been doing it for 3 months. The Suri scientist on the other end was named Vale. He was 24 years old and had 6 fingers, and was writing his doctoral thesis on cross-species immune system adaptation. He had reached out to her first. He had found one of her old papers from before the severance in a public archive and sent a message that began, "I know we are not supposed to speak, but your paper on human cellular regeneration has a method in it that I believe might work on Suri tissue, and I do not know anyone else to ask." She had written back the same day. They were now 47 messages deep. He had shared his draft data. She had shared 3 unpublished studies. The science was good. Better than good, it was the kind of work that happened when 2 very different biological systems were compared by people who genuinely wanted to understand them. Neither of them talked about the severance. They talked about mitochondria and protein chains, and the strange way that both human and Suri cells responded to low-oxygen environments with almost identical emergency adaptations, despite evolving on worlds 40 light-years apart. Vale sent her a message one night that said only, "I do not understand why they are afraid of your people. You are the most curious species I have ever read about." She thought about it for a long time before writing back. "We scare them because we do not stop, even when we should, even when it would be easier." He replied, "That sounds like a very good quality to have." She smiled and closed the channel and went back to her work. Back on Earth, Director Hale received a report that a human engineering team had successfully rebuilt a conclave model energy converter using only parts sourced inside human-controlled space, and had quietly made it 30% more efficient in the process. They had not been trying to improve it. They had just been trying to fix it, and fixing things was something humans could not do without also, almost accidentally, making them better. He read the report twice. Then he forwarded it to Admiral Voss with a single line attached, "We are not dying. We are changing shape." She wrote back, "Good. Easier to dodge that way. There is a game played in the outer belt stations of the Conclave called Drift, a betting game where players drop a small metal disc into a tube filled with rotating air currents and guess where it will land. The disc never falls straight. It catches the currents, skips sideways, climbs when it should drop, and lands in places nobody predicted. Old players say the game teaches you that objects with irregular edges always behave in ways the rules cannot contain." War Chief Grath of the Dorvaki had played Drift as a child. He thought about it when he crossed the border into unclaimed space and picked up the human fleet on his sensors. 8 years since the severance. He had been sent with 12 warships to perform what the Conclave called a capability assessment, which was a quiet way of saying, "Go look at them and confirm they are still small and frightened and no threat to anyone." His orders included the word intimidation in the mission brief, though it was buried in the middle of a long paragraph about diplomatic posture. He had expected to find 14 tired ships limping around a handful of struggling colonies. His sensors showed 17 warships, all running clean power signatures, no energy leaks, no stress indicators, the kind of readings that meant well-maintained vessels with competent crews. 2 of them were designs he had never seen, not modifications of old models, new designs. He sent a standard hail on the Conclave frequency. The response came back in under 4 seconds. The human admiral's voice was calm and did not sound surprised to see him. "War Chief Grath, you are 200,000 kilometers inside the boundary your own conclave established for human-controlled space. I assume you have a reason." He had not realized he had crossed the boundary. His navigator had given him the old coordinates. The boundary, he now saw on his corrected charts, had shifted. Humanity had formally extended its space by 2 sectors since his last briefing, and nobody at Conclave Command had updated the maps. He recovered quickly. "We are conducting a standard assessment." "Of course," Admiral Voss said. "While you conduct your assessment, I will share something with you." A data file came through on the Conclave standard channel. It opened into a star map, detailed, annotated, precise. It showed 41 star systems. He recognized none of them. "We charted these during the severance," she said. "New systems. Several have habitable worlds. None of them are registered with the Conclave because the Conclave told us we no longer existed, which freed us from the registration requirement. A pause. We also have detailed profiles of every Conclave fuel depot within 4 sectors of this border, maintenance schedules, supply rotation patterns. We had a lot of time to observe during the years you were ignoring us. Grath looked at the map. He looked at the fuel depot data, which was accurate down to the shift change times. He thought about the drift game, the disc going sideways when the rules said it should fall straight. "I have no hostile intent," he said carefully. "I know," she said. "If you did, this conversation would already be over. You have 12 ships, we have 17. 3 of yours are running a coolant inefficiency on the port drive banks. I can hear it in your engine signature. It is not an insult to point that out, it is just information." Another pause. "We are not your enemy, War Chief. We have never been your enemy. We would very much like to not be your enemy going forward. I think you already know that." He did. He had known it from the moment his sensors came back clean. People preparing for war do not run quiet, maintained ships. They run ships that are pushed hard and patched over. These ships were not patched. They were built. He withdrew his fleet across the border. On the return journey, he wrote his mission report. He wrote it twice, once the way command wanted it, full of reassuring language about human limitations and projected decline. Then he deleted that version and wrote the honest one. The honest report said, "They are not what we were told. They are not declining. They are not frightened. They have charted new space, improved on our technology, and sat quietly at our border for 8 years without firing a single shot. In 8 years of being told they did not exist, they built something. I do not know yet what to call it, but I recommend the Conclave stop pretending it is not there." He submitted the honest version. It was classified within 6 hours. Counselor Fiend received a leaked copy 3 days later. She had started receiving leaked copies of things shortly after the severance, anonymous sources inside the Conclave who were not yet ready to speak publicly but needed someone to know. She had never asked for them. They came anyway. She kept them in a locked archive she had labeled, "For when we are ready to be honest." She added Grath's report to the archive. She also, for the first time since the vote 8 years ago, allowed herself a small and private feeling of something that was almost hope. On Arden, Sergeant Solis got a message from her sister on Earth, who had just had a child. The message included a photo, a small human baby wrapped in a blanket, eyes closed, completely unaware of anything that had happened in the last 8 years. Solis looked at it for a long time. Then she pinned it to the wall above her desk next to the survey flag she had kept from the day she defeated a warship with paperwork. The galaxy thought they were waiting for humanity to finish dying. Humanity was busy being born again. In the Suri language, there is a word Haveth that has no direct translation in any other known language. It means the specific shame of discovering that the thing you destroyed was the thing you needed. The Suri use it rarely because it describes a feeling most people spend their entire lives trying never to have reason to use. In the 10th year after the severance, Haveth became the most searched word in the Conclave's shared linguistic database. The gravitational relay network in the Veth cluster had been built over 200 years and maintained by a rotating team of Conclave engineers from 9 different species. It was not glamorous work. Nobody wrote songs about relay maintenance, but 17 worlds depended on it for stable orbital correction, and when the cascade failure started in the outer relay rings, it moved fast. The first sign was a wobble in the orbital drift readings of Sundar, the 3rd planet in the cluster. Then the second relay went offline. Then the third. Within 6 days, the Conclave's best engineering teams were on site and deeply, quietly panicking. The math was not working. The standard repair protocols were not designed for a multi-node failure of this type. The models kept predicting stabilization, and then the next relay would drop, and the model would be wrong again. On day 9, a young Suri engineer named Vale, the same Vale who had been writing to Dr. Lena Marrow for 3 years, opened his private research archive and found a paper. It was human-authored, published 6 years earlier, 2 years into the severance, by a team working on the deep space relay network that kept humanity's own scattered colonies connected. The human colonies had faced an almost identical cascading failure, for different reasons, and had solved it. The solution in the paper was elegant. It did not fight the cascade. It used it, redirected the collapse energy back through the network in a controlled sequence, burning out 2 relay nodes on purpose to save the rest. Controlled demolition of the failure itself. Vale read it 3 times, then he did the math, then he ran the model. The model said it would work. He did not tell anyone where the solution came from. He presented it to the lead engineering team as a theoretical approach derived from his own work. He was 27 years old and they were skeptical, but the math was clean and they had nothing better. They ran it. It worked. The cascade stopped on day 11. All 17 worlds stabilized. The conclave issued a press release praising the fast work of its engineering teams. Vale's name was in the 4th paragraph. The source of the solution was not mentioned anywhere. He sat in his bunk that night and felt Haveth for the first time. He understood the word now in a way that reading it never taught him. He sent a message to Dr. Marrow. He told her everything. She did not respond with anger. She did not say, "I told you so," or "they should have known," or any of the things he half expected. She said, "You saved 17 worlds. That is what matters." And then she said, "But someone should know where the solution came from." He agreed. He was not sure how to do it without ending his career. He sat with that problem for 2 weeks. It was Grath who solved it for him. Grath had been quietly watching the cluster crisis from his border post, and through channels he did not officially have access to, he had seen the same paper Vale used. He had pulled it himself. He had seen the publication date, seen the authors' names, all human, and understood immediately what had happened. He went to the classified archive where his mission report had been buried. He pulled it out. He attached Vale's solution, the original human paper, and a timestamp showing the paper was published during the severance, when humanity was supposedly collapsing. He sent the full package to Counselor Fiend. Fiend took it to the floor of the conclave chamber on a morning session that was supposed to be about trade tariffs. She stood up before the tariff discussion could begin and read the whole thing out loud. All of it. The cluster crisis, the cascade failure, the solution, the paper, the date. The chamber was silent when she finished. A delegate from the Dorvaki said, "This is unverified." Fiend said, 17 worlds are alive. That is verification." Nobody spoke after that for quite a long time. High Speaker Doru was not in the chamber that morning. He was in his office when his aide brought him a summary. He read it once, set it down, and told his aide he needed an hour alone. He sat at his desk and did not move for most of that hour. He was thinking about a speech he had given 10 years ago in that same chamber in which he had said, clearly and on the record, that humanity's removal was a matter of galactic hygiene. He was thinking about 17 worlds. He did not change his public position that day, but he sent a private request to his archive team for the full catalog of human research published since the severance. All of it. He wanted to read it himself. By the end of the week, protest movements on 4 conclave worlds had adopted a new phrase. It spread through public channels faster than the conclave's communication managers could track it. 3 words, translated into every known language within a month. They saved us. It was not a complicated message. It did not need to be. Somewhere in the conclave's vast archive of recorded history, there is an old Vethani proverb that says, "A wall built to keep out the storm will eventually become the thing the storm breaks." High Speaker Doru had quoted it in 4 separate speeches over the course of his career. He had always used it to describe other species' mistakes. He did not think about that until the 12th year after the severance, when the wall he had built began to crack from inside. It started with the fringe species. They were not one group but many smaller civilizations that had never been granted full conclave membership, always kept in observer status, always told their time would come. They had watched the severance closely. They had also watched what came after. The Outer Coalition, as humanity had named its new governing body, had opened its charter to any world that wanted to join, with no minimum population requirement, no minimum technology threshold, and no waiting period. The charter had one rule: no world shall be abandoned. 11 fringe worlds applied to join the Outer Coalition in the same month. Then 7 more. The conclave, which had dangled full membership in front of these worlds for decades, suddenly found itself watching them leave for a door that was simply open. The political damage inside the conclave was immediate. 3 major member species, the Suri among them, formally demanded a review of the severance protocol. They used the cluster crisis data. They used Grath's report, which was now fully public after Fiend had released it 6 months earlier. They used the research numbers. In 12 years of supposed extinction, humanity had published more scientific work than any other single species in the galaxy. They had filed patents on technologies the conclave was now quietly using without attribution. Doru spent 3 weeks in closed sessions trying to hold the coalition together. He managed it barely, through a combination of procedural delays and private deals, but the no-confidence vote against his leadership came anyway. He survived it by 4 votes. 4. He went home that night and opened the Human Research Archive he had been reading privately for 2 years. He was deep into it now, not just the technical papers, but the history, the philosophy, the literature. He had started with the engineering work and ended up reading a human poem from 500 years ago about a man who planted a tree he would never see grow. He did not fully understand why the poem stayed with him. He thought about it often. On Arden, War Chief Grath arrived quietly. He had requested the visit through the Outer Coalition's diplomatic office, not through the conclave. He was technically on personal leave. He carried no weapons and arrived alone in a small transport. Sergeant Solis met him at the edge of the North Field. It was early morning and the wheat was tall. He stood at the edge of it for a moment before speaking. He looked at the field, the same field his fleet had stood over 10 years ago with seizure orders, and he said, "I was part of this. I did not give the order, but I was part of the system that did. I am sorry." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "Come on, we'll walk the field." They walked it together, the full border. She told him how they had almost lost it, not to the Dorvaki, but to a blight in year 3 that nobody had the right seeds to fight. How they had sent emergency exchanges to 3 human colony worlds, mixing seed stocks, trying 14 different approaches. How a 14-year-old girl on one of those colonies had noticed that a particular grain hybrid was blight-resistant and told her mother, who told the colony director, who sent it to Arden in time. "A child saved this field," Solis said. Grath said nothing for a while. Then, "We were told you would collapse." "We know," she said. "We used it. When someone tells you that you are finished, you either believe them or you prove them wrong. We are very bad at believing things that are not true." He left Arden 2 days later. He submitted a formal request to join the Outer Coalition's Military Advisory Council as an independent observer. It was the first time a currently serving conclave officer had made any formal application to a human institution. The conclave called it unauthorized. Grath said he had taken personal leave and could spend it as he wished. Director Hale received the request and approved it the same day. Then he made an announcement that the conclave had not seen coming, though in hindsight they should have. Humanity would not be applying to rejoin the galactic conclave. The Outer Coalition was not a temporary measure or a negotiating position. It was the new structure, open, flat, with rotating leadership and a charter that had already been co-signed by 23 worlds. "The conclave is welcome to apply," Hale said in the broadcast, and he was not being cruel when he said it. He meant it. The door was open. The same door that had always been open, the one humans had built because they remembered what a locked door felt like. Fiend watched the broadcast in her office. She was the one alien official who did not look surprised. She had been watching this particular future walk toward her for 12 years. She turned off the screen when it was over, made herself a cup of tea the human way. She had learned from Vale, who had learned from Marrow, who had learned from a grandmother on Earth who had insisted tea was better when it steeped slowly, and she sat with it in the quiet. Outside her window, the conclave's capital city was loud with debate and argument. She drank her tea and let them argue. They would come to the right place eventually. She had time. She had always had time. It was the conclave that had been running out of it. Ambassador Cyril of the Larathi people had given 612 speeches in her career. She had negotiated trade deals between species who had been in active conflict. She had delivered eulogies at the funerals of 3 heads of state. She had once talked a mining collective out of starting a war over an asteroid by spending 4 days explaining property law to people who did not believe in it. None of those things frightened her the way this did. She was standing in the corridor outside the United Nations Hall in Geneva, Earth, and she was reading her speech again for the 31st time. She had started writing it 8 months ago. She had rewritten it 19 times. Her aide had told her last week that it was ready. She had rewritten it twice more since then. The problem was that no speech written by someone who had voted to abandon a species could be good enough to give to that species 15 years later. She knew that. The conclave's new steering committee knew it. That was why they had chosen her, not because she was the best speaker, but because she was the most honest, and honesty was the only material that had a chance of holding up under the weight of what needed to be said. The hall held 4,000 people. It was full. Outside, on screens in every major city on Earth and every human colony and station in the outer coalition, 4 billion more were watching. The Larathi had a saying, "There are moments that do not wait for you to be ready. You simply step into them or you do not." She stepped in. She did not begin with a formal greeting. She did not begin with a title or a reference to the conclave's new name or a statement of intent. She began with a fact. 15 years ago, she said, this body voted to erase you from the galaxy's future. We were wrong, not partially wrong, not wrong in our methods but right in our intent. Wrong, completely, historically, and without any defense that holds up to honest examination. The hall was very quiet. She read the full apology. It took 40 minutes. It named specific acts: the blockade, the seizure attempts, the classified mission reports, the cluster crisis, and how it was solved. It named Counselor Fiend by name and said, on behalf of every species that had voted yes, she was right and we did not listen. It named the 14-year-old girl on the colony world whose eye for seed variation had saved the field on Arden, because Cyril had found that story and felt it was important that a child's name be in the record of this day. It did not minimize. It did not explain. It did not say we were afraid of you as if fear were an excuse. It said we were wrong and listed, item by item, why. When she finished, she stood very still and waited. Director Hale walked to the podium. He did not have notes. He had decided weeks ago that this response needed to come from memory, not paper. "We accept your apology," he said. "We do not require your guilt. We require only that you do better, as we all must." 3 sentences. The hall stayed quiet for a moment after them, and then the sound began, not applause exactly, more like a long exhale from 4,000 people who had been holding their breath. In the front row, Counselor Fiend was the only alien in the hall who wept. She was not embarrassed by it. She had been waiting 15 years for this moment, and she had promised herself she would not pretend it was a small thing when it arrived. High Speaker Doru, retired now, no longer any kind of speaker, watched the broadcast from his home on the Vithani homeworld. He watched all of it, including the response, and he did not turn it off early the way he had the first time Hale had spoken publicly, 5 years ago, when Doru still had the reflex of looking away from things that made him uncomfortable. He watched it to the end. He had spent the last 2 years writing a book. He had not told anyone he was writing it. It was a full account of the severance, from the first private discussions to the vote to the 15 years after, written from his own perspective in his own words, and it withheld nothing and defended nothing. He wrote the chapter about the Veth cluster crisis in a single sitting at night, and did not reread it for a week because he could not face it. Then he reread it and made it more honest. The book would be published the following year. It would become required reading in galactic assembly schools. The conclave had dissolved and reconstituted under that name 3 months before the Geneva ceremony, with a new charter co-written with human legal scholars. Doru would not attend the launch event for his book. He did not think his presence was the point of it. Dr. Marrow and Vale shared a stage in Geneva that evening for the first joint human-alien scientific award in history. They had been told to give brief remarks. They gave very brief remarks, and then spent the rest of the time laughing about something to do with a protein chain that nobody else in the room had the context to understand. The audience laughed too because the laughter was real, and laughter does not need context to be contagious. Admiral Voss did not attend the ceremony. She was on her flagship, which was now escort vessel for the diplomatic convoy rather than a warship in any operational sense. She stood at the viewport for a long time after the broadcast ended, looking at the stars. A junior officer asked her what she was thinking. She said that we almost let them make us into what they were afraid of. A long pause. We didn't, she said. That's everything. The stars did not change. They never did. But the people watching them were different now on both sides of the old border, and that was the thing that mattered. Not the apology, not the new charter, not the ceremony or the speech or the award or the book. Just the fact that, after 15 years of being told they did not deserve to exist, humanity had built something worth apologizing to. That was the victory. It always had been.